Hi, everyone. I'm Catherine Anaya, and welcome to the Women's Eye podcast. I appreciate you joining me today. This is where you're going to meet fascinating women who are leaving their mark, making a difference, and changing lives. This episode is brought to you by Casco Financial Group in Phoenix, Arizona. Catherine Scrivano is the president of Casco Financial Group, and she started her business to help people create the financial strength they need to achieve their dreams. She believes you don't have to be wealthy to be wise. And Catherine Scrivano is my guest today to talk about surprises, busted myths, and uncovered trends when it comes to how women think about money. Catherine, welcome back to the Women's Eye podcast. Always great to see you.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Well, this is a great topic because I'm someone who gets anxiety when it comes to money. So I'm looking forward to chatting with you about how women think about money because I don't like thinking about it, quite frankly. Do you find that's generally the case with women?
I do. I think that we're somewhat acculturated to be reluctant to think about money, to talk about money. And I suspect a little bit that it has to do with about the fact that in many ways, money equals power. And in some cases, talking about money makes us think about issues around power.
That's so interesting because I've always liked to think of myself as being a little bit powerful, but maybe not so much when it comes to money.
And I think anyone who knows you even slightly recognizes that you have a great deal of power. But when it comes to money, there's a certain independence factor and confidence factor that could make us less than confident around our absolute power. So it's just an opportunity for us to look at those things, compartmentalize, and decide what's relevant and what isn't. We can throw off some of the old thinking if we need to.
Right. Well, that makes sense because you point to a study that was conducted earlier this year that you say gave some surprising results in how women think about money. What surprised you most?
The fact that many of the women in this study had very high levels of education. They had great success in their careers, but the vast majority described low confidence in their ability to manage money. And that really amazed me. Only 12% felt that they are confident investors, and that over 1 in 5 said that they were not confident at all in managing assets.
Well, and that's surprising to me too, because I've often felt like I was alone in my lack of confidence, but it's somewhat encouraging to find out that I'm not. But you feel like those findings are important enough in that they can turn into educating conversations, such as the one we're having about what women may need to know about money, such as, and let's get into some of those a little bit, the myth that women aren't really interested in investment topics. This study showed that's actually far from true, correct?
Far from true. In this particular study, 78% expressed a desire to be more well-informed.
And I always feel like I want to be more informed. It's just the way that I digest it, and sometimes the way it's presented is a big factor in how I feel connected to it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Do you feel like that's certainly the case with a lot of women?
It is in this survey, and frankly, in my own experience in my practice, I find loud and clear that what women are saying, in essence, is one size fits all does not fit. Women want specific advice tailored to them, tailored to their circumstances and what's important to them. And I think I don't want to take responsibility for my industry, but frankly, these the boilerplate planning and recommendations are prevalent. It tends to be rather lazy and full of jargon. And women are pretty loud and clear about, no, thank you, speak to me in terms that I can understand and in ways that are meaningful to my life.
Mm-hmm. I'm finding there are a lot more resources these days, though, where you are getting that information in different ways, shapes, and forms with social media, in fact.
Which is good and bad. We know that the potential for misinformation within social media is certainly there. I don't discourage anyone from using the internet, using social media, et cetera, as points of reference, perhaps just to develop the questions. But in this, like everything else, we have to vet it. Having information doesn't necessarily mean that you have knowledge that you can apply. So developing your questions, developing your curiosity, oh, please do that all day long. But make sure that any decisions that you make are based on real information and reliable resources.
Yes, research matters. The study also uncovered a trend that women are really looking for specific and tailored financial advice, as you mentioned. So what would be an example of a better approach for women, in your opinion?
That's kind of the challenge with the one size fits all doesn't fit all. The more important approach is to own that, to recognize that your extraordinary life is valuable and simply demand that the market come to you. Don't compromise. This is important to you as a woman. Probably there are family members and others that are affected by this. Women tend to be more plugged into their communities, and so our community, please be responsible. I will benefit as a result. So just being clear about what's important to you and not acting until you're satisfied that the decisions you make support your values.
Go with your gut, as I like to say. It usually speaks pretty loudly and quickly.
Yeah.
You know, I know my anxiety personally about money stems from how I grew up and also the issues it created when I got married, divorced, and then married again. And that's a common life circumstance, or those are common life circumstances you believe influence the attitudes, motivation, and concerns that women have toward money, right?
Well, as with everything, our experiences are what develop our frames of reference. When it comes to money, though, I ask people to reflect on how they were brought up, the conversations around money in their households, and just, looking at some of those influences, and then decide if they make sense going forward. We can acknowledge them and abandon them if they don't fit for us right now, especially as women through the last, I'm going to say 40 to 50 years. How dramatic is the change from a woman who was supported by her husband as the only model that we looked for? There was always a man in charge of the money, to nowadays, everything is possible. But yet we still tend to default to some of those old patterns just because we haven't really thought about them. We just think of them as the way things are. I suggest that we stop, examine, adapt, and adopt the things that are appropriate to us, discard anything that's not.
It's always a good time to shake things up. So let's walk through those common life experiences that you referred to, the four of them. Number one being divorce or widowhood. What are some similar and differing concerns in those circumstances?
Well, referring back to the study that we talked about earlier, and this is not even remarkably new information, but 70% of married women are saving or have saved for retirement, but less than half of unmarried women are saving for retirement. There are a lot of areas of financial vulnerability, general money management, spending plan, day to day, healthcare planning, legal proxies, retirement security, all of those things that are influenced by money seem to be more commonly addressed by women who are married than unmarried. So you can see that huge vulnerability for those who are, taking responsibility for everything.
And what is the key to educating those unmarried women about the importance of securing their future financially?
Well, the unmarried woman, especially if they have children or perhaps are caring for parents, if they've got other responsibilities that we as a society tend to ask our females to do, they've got a lot on their plate. So it's really important, I think, to have a support system in place that gives them permission to prioritize. Not only prioritize how to get to the next paycheck, but long-term planning, and to be thinking about, those life events that happen, death, divorce, disability, all of those things are going to have a financial impact. And I'm not saying that any of them are going to ever be easy, but they can be less hard with some planning.
Mm-hmm. And what kinds of situations or challenges do couples face if they're unmarried in long-term partnerships? Are there certain financial challenges out there for them?
The biggest one really is that there are things afforded legally to married couples that are not taken for granted with unmarried couples. So they have to get ahead of those things in estate planning, documents including wills and trusts and naming beneficiaries, healthcare powers of attorney. Again, these are things that would default automatically through our system to a spouse, but a non-spouse needs to have their authority documented in advance. And a recent survey of LGBTQ partners found that a vast majority think that they will be working well past retirement age. And some of that, I think, has to do with the fact that we as a society have not done a good job in preparing them for, getting ahead of some of these default financial issues. Not all of them can be resolved, but many, many can be resolved with some planning and preparation in advance. And that translates to the financial impact going forward as well.
Yeah, makes absolute perfect sense. The number 3 common life experience you talk about is primary earners. Now, I've been the primary earner in a previous relationship, and it really can create some underlying levels of conflict, correct?
Oh, it was sure. And it's kind of going back to what we talked about earlier. If our prior model was that the male is the primary earner, then being by default, he is also probably the primary decision maker. We are seeing more and more females becoming the primary earner in their households, but not having the default position of being the decision maker. And I'm not here to judge. I look at the whole concept of how a family spends its money, what they spend it on, what's important. I look at all of those chores, to be frank with you. Sometimes it's just a division of labor, but it may come down to one person bringing in the money, the other person being responsible for the spending plan. That's fine unless the relationship ends. And then that can totally backfire because the one facilitating the spending plan has a distinct advantage. So the person earning the money also needs to be very engaged in how it's spent. And when we're talking about this new paradigm of females being the primary earner, I would encourage them not to give up total control, to be engaged, even if they're not the ones physically writing the checks or paying the bills every month. They need to know how much it takes to keep that household running and where all the dollars are.
I can attest to the importance of that for sure. Number 4, entrepreneurship. You point to women starting new businesses at a rate much higher than their male counterparts.
Is that exciting?
So, yeah, it's wonderful news. So with that, then, should women have a different financial approach than men when it comes to their businesses?
Working with a number of organizations, including our local Better Business Bureau, which has a tremendous support and initiative for women business owners. One of the things that we see, surveys are consistently citing growth as the number one goal for businesses, for women-owned businesses, and we celebrate those contributions those businesses are making in our community, but we often have to counsel these entrepreneurs in a way that their male counterparts don't necessarily need, because they tend to treat the business as a dependent rather than an asset. We give birth to our children and we nurture them. We give birth to our businesses and we nurture them, sometimes to the detriment of what the business needs to provide to our household. So for women, so often we're counseling them to really examine their attitude around the business, making sure that growth means increasing sales without decreasing profits, knowing your numbers, building your teams, making decisions that support the action plan, just like I say, don't nurture your business to the point of taking away from your life.
Such great advice. Valuable information as always that you provided. So just to button things up then, women do approach money differently than men, but it doesn't mean we're less interested or want to be less engaged than men, correct?
And absolutely. And I wish I had numbers right in front of me, but there are consistent studies that show women tend to make better investors than men. And I think that's really interesting. The return on a female's portfolio tends to be higher than their male counterparts. I am not suggesting we have pink mutual funds and blue mutual funds. What seems to be true is that women are more thoughtful, so that when they make the decision, it's something that they have really committed to. They can take advantage of downturns. They can ride out opportunities to buy more. There's a whole lot that goes behind that. But for all of our conversation about women not having confidence around it, when they jump in, they tend to do really well. And I think we can all celebrate that.
Well, I think that needs to be a future podcast conversation.
Let's do that one. I love it. Yes.
I love it too. Catherine, thank you so much. Always good to hear some financial wisdom from you. And by the way, you can learn more about Catherine Scrivano by going to our website, thewomenseye.com. I also want to let you know that The Women's Eye has 2 books. The first is called 20 Women Changemakers. You can shop for it wherever you buy books and at changemakersbook.com. And our newest book, 20 Women Storytellers, is out now. You can find more about that at womenstorytellersbook.com. That does it for this edition, this episode of the Women's Eye podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Catherine Anaya. Until next time, remember, it's the world as we see it.